It's right on cue, and I love talking to you this morning with Nebraska back on this roll. And I would consider, even for a relatively younger guy, you've been a basketball fan your whole life, right? Nebraska basketball fan. Are you are you over kind of Sam said something on Monday I thought was interesting. He's like he wants Nebraska fans to stay current because he thinks this team is pretty good and the past isn't on them, and he wants them to play freer, and he's some legit points. As a fan, as a lifer who's seen some ups and downs and kind of had to ride the wave, are you capable of kind of staying in the moment when you're watching this team perform 6 in a row, now 4 in a row to the good?
I think you have to. I think at some point you have to take stock of the team that you're watching and then determine what their actual level of play is. And part of it for me, when that 6-game losing streak, yes, you got blown out by Purdue, and yes, you got blown out by Wisconsin. The other 4 games in there were basically coin flip games, and you just kept coming up on the wrong side of the coin flip. And some of that is you, right? Like they didn't finish games. I think that's one of the things that stands out to me about this team. End of half, end of game. I don't love Nebraska in that situation. Start of the half, start of the game, that's kind of where Nebraska seems to be at its best because they catch people by surprise sometimes, or they maybe have a wrinkle here or there to start a game or do something a little bit unique. But yeah, I looked at it that they were the same team that beat UCLA, was the same team that struggled to close it out against Rutgers or close it out against USC. I mean, to me, they're an above average basketball team that can lean towards good or can lean towards average. And on the wrong night, they're playing average to even below average against another average or above average team. There's no easy games in the Big Ten. Even Washington was a struggle for Nebraska because they came out and they were hot. Nebraska was able to continue their offensive show that night. Washington cooled down. Nebraska overtook them. So even during the losing streak, it wasn't so much, man, was this a mirage? It was, okay, why are they continuing to struggle in the end of games? I don't know that they figured that out necessarily, but what has happened is that some of their role players have started to play a little bit better in small increments. You have different guys stepping up in different games. Raleigh Wooster was huge against Oregon. Braxton Mea's 7 minutes in the Ohio State first half, I thought were critical for Nebraska. He scored the last 5 points of the last 6:44 of that half to keep it from being a double-digit game. He's important sometimes in there for defense in the post. He made 3 free throws, which he's only made 6 all season. Like, you get these little Herculean efforts every other game from different players, and you may not get great Andrew Morgan every time out, but when he's giving it to you and you're also getting what you expect out of Juwan Gary and Brice Williams, and Connor Esiason can toss in a 3 or here or there. I mean, their pathway to victory is narrow, but it's still conceivable because I think they have a nice collection of role pieces around Brice and Juwan. If Brice and Juwan can stay on their track, Nebraska is going to be a tough team for a lot of people to beat, especially when Brice, it feels like, has gone to another level in this 4-game winning streak because he's being less efficient, which is a weird way to praise someone. But he's willing to eat more bad shots that could become baskets for you or be more aggressive because the alternative on Nebraska's offense sometimes they're playing 2-on-5, depending on who's on the court and if Connor Esiason can shoot that night. So it's a unique setup, and I give a ton of credit to Fred Hoiberg, a ton of credit to Fred Hoiberg. So to the idea of staying current with the team, I think the big thing is, you can't look at this team as if it's last year's team. They're set up entirely different. They play differently. Nebraska has to choke teams out in a lot of ways for stretches of the game and then just score enough points to come out on top. Sometimes they're able to win by double digits doing that. Sometimes they can win a squeaker. Sometimes they end up losing by 5 because they don't do enough of either the offense or the defense. But I think they have the ability to play in different game flows in the way that last year's team maybe couldn't. And I think that makes them a really unique team as we get towards the crunch time here right before the postseason or even the postseason. I don't know if they're better than last year, but I don't think it really matters. I think this team has the ability to play with a lot of different teams. They also have the ability that if they show up, the defense isn't good and the offense isn't there, they're going to get smashed. I mean, that's kind of where they are. But it feels like they're headed to a 20-win season, which you would have polled people in November. A lot of people would have lied to you if they would have told you that this was coming. I don't think people believed in this team. And that's why I think it's such a credit to Fred Hoiberg, because he's getting max performances out of a number of players here.
Schaefer, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Berke injury, because you mentioned the 7 crucial minutes out of Braxton Mia. That's not a guy that I feel like Nebraska's been able to count on over the course of the season. Has been pretty hit and miss with his minutes.
And he still was a -7 +7, which was the
and that's the wild thing in there, because it's such a bad stretch for Nebraska. But if that's a -12, I don't think they win that game.
Right. And so my question is, like, with that injury, seems like he's going to be out Thursday, at least according to reports. Don't know how long that ankle is going to linger. How do you feel about this team knowing that they've got that wild card to the equation out there, especially considering that Berke has had some moments where he's played well this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think where they're going to miss him the most is at times he can be their most consistent rebounder. And he has a lot of issues and has a lot of potential. I think he's a really frustrating player to watch. And at the same time, it's hard for me to walk away from it and think he isn't really valuable to what Nebraska does, too. So it's not like there's an obvious replacement to him. But I think they're going to have to get more minutes out of Andrew Morgan. They're going to have Morgan and Mia stay out of foul trouble, because those are your 2 post guys. I don't know that you can go to a Kale Jacobson at the end of the half. Can you get more minutes out of that? Gavin Griffiths seems pretty confined to the bench at this point.
Is there any part of you that wonders he must like?
I would love to see more of him. I would love to just see
make shots
3 minutes a game or something. Yeah, because even if he's coming in and all he's doing for 3 minutes is he's putting up 2 3-pointers, if you're getting 1 out of those 2, that's kind of valuable for Nebraska, because it's so hard for them to come up with 3 points in a possession. It really is. And so I would like to see him more, but I understand it hasn't gone well. And if it's not working in practice, if your rotation is fine for what it is. I mean, I see Aaron Eulis out there, and I don't know what he's giving them anytime he's playing. So I don't know why Gavin Griffiths can't get off the bench, but it's a different position. And I think he's there to largely spell Hoiberg or
the broadcast team was surprised when Eulis got in the paint and kind of threw up the floater for feet. Like, Eulis with the shot.
I
was,
and I don't mean to insult him. I am stunned at how bad it looks sometimes when he's on the court, given that the experience that he came in with. And I don't know if it's just he doesn't fit in the flow of things, or if he just
I think it's
kind of tries to do too much when he's out there, but it has not looked good most of the year. And so I would like to see more Gavin. So maybe Berke's injury leads to more Gavin Griffiths in a small stint. But I think they're going to try to get more out of Andrew Morgan, who I think has been very good for Nebraska in a quiet way. And then Braxton Mia, who I think can provide more than he has. It's just you have to manage those minutes, because he can't run the way that everybody else can. And I think that's why he hasn't played against certain teams.
I think for him, it's his effort level, right? If he just maximizes and it's only for 4 or 5 minutes, man, do that.
Well, I mean, do you guys – I think maybe both of you were at the Creighton game, and I'm sure you watched the Creighton-Nebraska game. Braxton Mia was terrific effort-wise in that game. He worked his butt off defending Kalkbrenner in the first half. Like, the first time he went to the bench, he was exhausted because of the 5 minutes that he was in. He worked so hard in that game, and that version of him exists. I don't know that they can work him into everything else that they try to do. And I think you get worried that teams, especially I think Oregon, he didn't play in that game. You're worried that teams were going to run on you. And he's a little bit of a detriment conditioning wise and speed wise.
That's Mike Schaefer, Husker247. Schaefer, moving forward, and not to stick on Berke here too long, but Fred said he may miss some time. How long can Nebraska sort of weather this next stretch without Berke in the lineup?
I think something we probably need to do is acknowledge that Nebraska has been pretty fortunate health-wise. Lots of teams have injuries. Lots of teams have guys that are banged up or are not able to be as effective in playing as they are. And this is part of the adjustment of being a college basketball team. So it's unfortunate that he's out, but I don't look at Nebraska I don't expect things to be any different for Nebraska because they're missing the third or fourth guy on their team. Like other people are going to have to step up, but you're going to take on a Northwestern team that's missing its top player. You're going to take on Owen Freeman, an Owen Freeman-less Iowa team later in the season. Like this is what happens in college basketball, and Nebraska's been pretty fortunate injury-wise. So, in an ideal scenario, I think if you could have them back by Penn State, which I believe would be missing 2 games, that would be sort of, I think, the best case scenario here. I would be surprised. He's obviously not going to play on Thursday. I would be surprised if he's back for the Northwestern game. But if you can get him for Penn State and Michigan down the line, getting that win against Ohio State was huge because I look at the rest of the month, and if you can beat one of Maryland, Michigan, and then win either one or both of the away games, you've set yourself up in such a great position. You don't want to say that they can middle it out and split the rest of the month and still be fine because you want to stack as many wins as you can. You want to get over 500 if you can in conference play. But I think they can survive this even if they drop a game or two this stretch.
They have another one against Ohio State, so that could end up being the difference. But currently sitting at an 8, 2 games behind Illinois. If you had to guess, would you say 8 higher or lower for Nebraska to finish?
I'm going to be the rare version of Mike Schaefer and go optimistic here. I think they're going to finish better than 8th in the even with this injury, I like the way that they are playing. I think that there's a strong internal belief. I like this version of Brice Williams. I like how the schedule sets up. I don't think there's anyone they can't beat that's left on their schedule. I don't think there's any guaranteed wins either, but I think Fred Hoiberg's a good coach. I think he has them playing in a good confidence level right now, and I think they're going to finish closer to 6 than they are 8 in the conference.
They could pull within a game of Illinois if UCLA can find a way to get a dub. That's a pretty big matchup quietly for at 7 tonight in Champaign.
Don't by fighting Mick Cronin's, they'll take care of business.
Do you guys think that we do this too often where every year it's college basketball season and there's going to be a stretch where a team struggles a little bit, and then you have to remind yourself there's 31 games, there's 5 months of action. Like this is a marathon every single time. Nebraska had that stretch last year where they lost a few games in January, and it was, they're just not going to get it done, and they're going to waste another season. Like I think we have to remember, and because it's so new for Nebraska fans to experience winning in conference play, you just have to remember it's a marathon, and it's the same thing towards the finish. There's 8 games left, 7 games left. So if Nebraska can manage to get through these 7 games, I think they're going to be in really strong position going into Big Ten play or tournament play.
As a diehard Carolina fan, man, I tell myself that all the time, but it's the second time.
Just having a bad stretch.
We're just having a bad stretch. In 3 years, they won't make the NCAA tournament. So the answer to that,
as someone who's watched a grand total of 8 minutes of Clemson play this year, I was kind of impressed by the Tigers.
Schaefer,
that wasn't even really their guys that got Carolina.
Oh, I was talking about the Duke game. North Carolina, I don't think is very good.
Clemson is capable, and Clemson is capable.
I will say, Schaefer, to your point, teams go through ebbs and flows over the course of the season. It is pretty unusual for an NCAA tournament team to have a 6-game losing streak and still make the tournament. Like that is, I get there are ups and downs, but that stretch in particular was pretty concerning, even though most of the games were points.
And I don't mean to minimize it because you're still the team that lost 6 games in a row. It's more so rather than, and there was people that will claim they didn't do this. There are a lot of people that wanted Fred Hoiberg fired in the middle of that.
If they say they're lying.
So it's one of those things, like, you kind of have to let the season play out. Like, especially in these long season sports, we want to treat everything like football, where it's you want to have the instant reaction. You want to measure the how everyone feels after every play. And basketball, you have to have a more measured take. We're going to experience this in baseball, where Nebraska baseball might have a rough start because of who they're going to play, or have a rough stretch at some point. And we're going to hear about that. And then by the end of the year, they're going to be right where you expect them to be. I mean, that's just, the larger point of this is we can't treat everything like football, and we shouldn't even treat football the way that we do sometimes.
Let me ask you something, Schaefer, because I'm going to do this with Ravi before we talk to Coach Bolt at 9:43. Nebraska's currently 8, and we know the remainder of the schedule. Let me give you three teams ahead of Nebraska, and I want you to tell me if you think they're better or worse than their perception. Real quick, you ready?
Yeah.
Michigan at 10-2. Are they better or worse than that?
I don't think they're as good as what people might perceive them to be. So worse than their perception.
Wisconsin 9-4. Are they better or worse than we think?
I don't believe in them either. You look at the numbers; they haven't beat as many quality teams as even Nebraska has. But they smoked Nebraska, so pair that one up.
Last one, Maryland 8-5 in the conference. Are they better?
Better.
I agree.
They play everyone hard. This is a really tough game for Nebraska on Thursday. They play everyone hard. Maryland has earned my respect.
And they got over the road woes too, kind of.
That's Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. We appreciate it, Schaefer.
Thanks, Schaefer.
See you guys.